Hey, it's Pastor Doug here, and I am ready to tell you another story. Hope that you are having a great time, and I've certainly enjoyed it myself. I'm going to tell you a story I haven't told in a long time. It's called Jack Seeks His Fortune. And as you listen to these Jack tales, you'll notice that just about any folk tale can get told in the context of Jack and Will and Tom and his mom and his dad and the world that he lives in. And this was a time when Jack was not as little as he once was. He was getting to be growed up, and as he was growing up, he needed to, have an adventure. Everybody wants an adventure. Get out there and see the world. There's no telling what will happen if you just let yourself go. And so Jack's mama's had a long talk with him. Says, "Oh, Jack, Will had gone a long time ago and he's out on his own in the world, and so is Tom. Why, they are both having a great time. They have had their adventures, they have found their fortunes, and it's time for you to get going too." Now, his mama was a good woman. His daddy was already working and carrying on for the king, and he made things great for them, and it was Jack's turn to get out and see what he could do. But Jack didn't have a lot of skills, and he didn't really know what he could do, and so he just sort of decided to get up the next day and go. And he was going along, and he didn't go very far until he come to one of their neighbors' houses. He'd gone probably 5 or 6 miles, enough to be a little bit far away from home back then, but not too far. It was just the next place over. Why, when Jack was a-coming up there to get him a little something to drink, the neighbor says, "Oh, Jack, what are you doing out here?" He goes, "Oh, I'm out to have an adventure. I think I ought to find my fortune. That's what I think I need to do." He says, "Oh, Jack, that's a big thing to do, to find your fortune. You ought to stay here for a while until you figure out what that's going to be." Jack thought that was a pretty good idea, and so he decided right there he'd just sort of work there. He says, "Now, Jack, I got some work to do around here, and I'll give you a little bit of money if you just help me out." Jack said, "Oh, I could do that. I'm pretty good around a farm. I grew up on one." He goes, "I know you have, Jack. You're probably a pretty good hand." And so he and this farmer, they got to working one day, and he said, I believe in paying a man at the end of the day," and gave him a coin. And Jack looked at it. He'd never owned any real money like that before. And he says, "Oh my, this is a way to have a fortune like this." And he says, "Now, Jack, what are you going to do with that coin?" He says, "Oh, I don't know." He goes, "I don't want you to lose it. So why don't I just keep it for you until you're ready to go on your way, and then I'll just give it all together for you." Jack thought, "Oh, that's a great idea. I'd love to be able to not worry about my money like that, and I'll just stay here until I figure out what I want to do." Well, like a lot of young men, he couldn't figure out what he wanted to do, or where he needed to go, or what adventure might lay ahead, or how he'd ever earn and find a fortune, and so he just helped out that farmer. One day turned into two, and two turned into a week, and a week turned into a month, and a month turned into a year, and a year turned into 2 years, then 3 years, and finally Jack decided that, why, he'd been there so long, he was going to get so old, he'd never be able to have a fortune or a venture or anything like that. And so he says, "Well, I've really enjoyed being here, I really have, but I think it's time to go, and so it's time for you to give me my money, and I'll get on my way." Oh, and the farmer says, "I hate to see that, Jack. You've been good around here, but I understand you come here wanting to go, and we've been surprised you've been here so long. Sometimes you can just get comfortable in a place and not ever get on to where you could ever really find your fortune." Why, he'd been there so long, those coins had stacked up because he hadn't spent it on anything, and the farmer didn't charge him for room and board. That was probably part of his pay. And why, when he came out, he had this great big sack that was just full of coins. Jack tried to pick it up, but it was pretty heavy. And so he put it up on his back and he started out to go and seek his fortune. And he was a going on the road, but that was getting pretty heavy and it was pretty hot, and he just wore him out. He didn't get very far down the road, and he was just thinking to himself, man, this money is a holding me back. Here I am trying to seek my fortune, and I got this weight around me, and I can't get on down the road. I can't walk very fast, and it's a weight on my shoulders, and man, I wish I could just, get on with my fortune. And as he was sitting there lamenting about his terrible situation, he noticed a guy coming along with a horse and a buggy. Why, he was coming along and he says, "Hey, Jack, what you doing over there?" He says, "Oh, I'm ready to go and seek my fortune, but this big old bag of money is just a weighing me down." It's a big old bag of money. What do you mean? And so Jack told him how he came about it, and that old man said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I just because I'm trying to help you out, Jack, that's all it is, but I'll trade you this horse and buggy straight even for that sack of money. Why, this is a good horse, and it'll get you on down the road, and you could go seek your fortune. Sure enough, this will help you go." Jack thought about it, says, "Oh, that's the very thing I need. Get rid of this big old weight, and I have that horse and that buggy, and I could just take off on my fortune." And so they made their swap, and that man started slugging that poor sack of money on his shoulders, and off he went. And Jack got up there, and it didn't dawn on him that he'd have to feed that horse and groom that horse, and then have to figure out how to maintain and drive that buggy. And he'd never really driven a buggy before, so trying to figure out how to rein in the horse and everything, it was a mess. The horse would want to go one way, he'd want to go another, and Jack was used to walking through the woods and up trails and up and down ravines, and that horse and buggy couldn't go the way that Jack knew the roads, and so he had to be stuck on the big old road. No going through the trails, no going on adventures. And Jack was lamenting to himself that here he had this horse and this buggy, and it was just a weighing him down. He needed something that could get him on. And as he was going along, getting further in toward town, he noticed this woman had come along with an old cow, and he started thinking to himself, why, that's what I need. That cow would just follow me anywhere I went, give me milk. It'd just eat the grass wherever I was, and I wouldn't have to clean up after it so much. Well, probably as much, but not so bad. And so he just asked that woman if they could just trade 1-to-1, and that's exactly what they decided to do. And so they made that trade, and so that woman was kind of looking at him saying, "You sure, the horse and buggy for this cow?" And he says, oh yeah, that cow's exactly what I need to get on and help my fortune." He said, "Well, we'll just go ahead and do that." And so that's the way they was a-going, and that's the way that they was a-working. And so they just went right on their way, and so she took off happy as a lark with that buggy and that horse, and Jack took off with his cow just as delighted as he could be. Why, but that cow wasn't a very mindful cow. It kept wandering off into the field, and he'd have to chase it back, and it was sort of a dry cow, didn't never get any milk out of it, and he was having a hard time going along. And as he was going along, chasing that cow here, moving it there, and trying to get it down the trail, and it was wanting to go into the pasture, that he said, "I'll never be able to go on my fortune. I won't be able to do anything like that. What I really need is just something that'll help me out, and something that I could maybe get along." And as he was leading that old cow finally back on the road, he noticed a fella that was walking along and had a little old dog. And Jack said, "Oh, that'd be great if I had a dog like that. It'd just do whatever I'd want to do. It'd be even like a friend for me." And so that little old guy said, "Sure, I'll trade you this little old dog even for that cow." And so Jack just knew that this cow was going to be the next thing he needed and get rid of so he could go on his fortune. And he got that puppy and going along. But that puppy wanted to play, and it wanted to eat, and it wanted to run around and scratch and sniff, and it would run off. And it was worse than having that old cow around. And Jack just thought to himself, what am I going to do now? I mean, hound's good, but it's going to take years for this thing to grow up. And I don't want to wait for years to get on my fortune and find my adventure. I need to get on now. And as he was carrying on, he noticed that there was another person coming along, and they had a little old hen in their arm. He goes, oh, that's what I needed. I could trade this dog and get that hen, and that hen could be in my arms, and it'd lay eggs for me, and I could just carry it wherever I wanted to go. And so he made the offer, and they were said more than happy to trade that hen off for that beautiful hound dog. Now, when he got that hen, he says, now I can finally seek my fortune. And he finally got his way in, finally got into town, and he went to the blacksmith shop, first place he went in there. And as he got there, he put that hen down, and the blacksmith just looked at Jack and said, what are you doing there? He says, well, I'm out to seek my fortune. And he told him his sorry tale, and then he got to the end of it. He says, oh, I bet you that hen's going to keep you up too. He says, but I know what you need. And that blacksmith went out the back of his door and come back in and put 2 stones on the counter. Jack said, what's that? He says, oh, Jack, I figure you'd know what these are. Why, these are nail smoothing stones. Why, you just put one stone down and you put a crooked nail on it or a bent nail, and you slap the other stone on top of it, and it'll just straighten that nail right out. Why, people all over the place around here have got bent nails and don't know what to do with them, and they're just waiting for someone to come along to straighten out their nails. Why, you'll have a fortune in no time, and I'm sure it'll be great adventure going up to all those people and getting to meet them and finding out how you could just really help them out this way. Why, when he started to thinking about that, he said, oh, that's right. That's exactly what I needed to do, but I don't really got no money. And he said, well, I'll trade you even for that old hen you got there. And so Jack took them 2 stones and he went on his way. But you know what? Nobody wanted their nails straightened out. They didn't want to pay someone to straighten out their nails. And Jack tried house after house, and he was getting pretty frustrated. And he was going up to one old house to ask them, and noticed that they had an old well. And he walked over to that well, and he put his stones on the edge of that well, and he let the bucket down. And as he was pulling it back up, why, he hit them stones, and both of them dropped down in the bottom of the well, kaplunk, kaplunk. And Jack finally breathed a sigh of relief. He says, oh, this is truly my lucky day. Why, here I have been held up from seeking my fortune. I had that sack of money, and then that horse, and then I had the cow and the dog and the chicken, and man, and now there is nothing a holding me back from a seeking my fortune. And that's the end of that. Now, I tell you that story because sometimes we don't realize how good we've got it until it's gone. Sometimes we can't recognize the fortune that we enjoy, that we already have, and we often, our ventures and going in the world just one step after another, we end up having less and less and less until we've got nothing at all. Or it might be that you could say that all of these things in this life are holding us back, and we get so worried about them that they truly are keeping us from following God. In fact, Jesus said that if you're going to follow me, you've got to leave everything behind, because we do let things get hold on us, and we've got to let them go so that we can follow him wherever he leads. And where he leads will be a grand adventure. And that's the end of that.